Joining me via Zoom is the Ambassador of Israel in Nigeria, Ambassador Michael Freeman. Mr. Ambassador, you're welcome to our program.
Thank you very much for having me.
Yes, Your Excellency, it's been a couple of days of so much happening in the Middle East, and to be so precise, in Israel and then around the world. How would you describe the position of the Israeli government in this ongoing conflict?
You're right. It's been a very difficult week now. Last Saturday, thousands of Hamas terrorists stormed our border, broke through, entered into our towns and our villages and our community, and slaughtered men, women, and children mercilessly on a barbarity that we haven't really seen since ISIS. The way that ISIS used to do things, these Hamas terrorists did even worse. You know, they murdered children, they murdered women, they murdered their parents in front of their children, children in front of their parents. They burnt babies alive. Really horrific things. And over 1,300 Israeli citizens have been murdered, massacred by these barbarians. And Israel is now everything it needs to defend our population and to make sure that Hamas can never do this again.
Yes, 1,300 Israelis killed, unprecedented in recent history. How are you responding? Yes, the Prime Minister says when this is done, the Hamas will never have this kind of capacity ever again. But moving forward, there's a lot of collateral damage. A lot of innocent people are being killed in this retaliatory move.
Well, as you said, Prime Minister Netanyahu was very clear. We're going to stop Hamas doing this again. Hamas slaughtered 1,300 of our civilians, of our citizens. And on top of that, they have kidnapped over 100 Israeli civilians and taken them into Gaza, where they're holding them hostage. And we're going to do everything we can to return them. Now, we've given a warning today. We've been very, very clear that Palestinians should move south within Gaza so that they don't get caught up in the fighting. And Hamas have told them not to go anywhere. Hamas want their civilians to be in the line of fire. We aren't fighting the Palestinians. We aren't fighting Islam. We are fighting Hamas. Hamas are a murderous terror organization that treat the Palestinian population terribly as well. What we will do will be better for Israel and better for the Palestinians. You know, there's no question this is going to be a bloody war, and we will do what we can to avoid civilian casualties. But our focus is doing what any country in the world would do, and that is defending our population and stopping Hamas from ever doing slaughter ever again.
Hamas just said earlier today that 13 Israelis have been killed in the retaliatory bombing of Gaza. How is that affecting the Israeli response? Because you are determined to make sure that Israelis who have been kidnapped are returned. And we are hearing now that some of them are being killed in the process of the retaliation. So how do you manage these two scenarios?
Firstly, Hamas bear full responsibility for the people that they've kidnapped. We've seen no evidence of this. This is part of Hamas's psychological warfare. And I would advise all the media to be very wary of any reports that come out of Gaza that are provided by Hamas, because we know that Hamas are a radical terror organization that lie. I mean, we've seen them saying over the last days they didn't kill any civilians. This is the same organization, this same terror that not only killed Israeli civilians and slaughtered them, they recorded it and posted it to social media. One family tells the story, and just think how horrific this is. If the Hamas terrorists turn themselves in, the Hamas leadership turn themselves in, they release all the hostages, this would finish. This is not a war against the Palestinians. This is a war against Hamas.
The problem in the Middle East comes with a lot of history. There have been arguments about should it be security before peace or peace before security. And this has lingered and lingered. Moving forward, of course, what is occupying the attention of Israelis right now is how to make sure that Hamas does not have the capacity to do what they did about 5-6 days ago. But moving forward, this whole crisis may not be resolved in the battlefield. What is going to happen now after this action by Israel?
Look, it's a good question, and we need to talk about the day after, and we need to worry about how we move forward for a better future for both Israelis and Palestinians. That's definitely our interest, to have a better future for both Israelis and Palestinians. But to do that, we need to make sure that Hamas can never have any part of that again. Hamas have objected to any peace between Israelis and Palestinians. Hamas have objected to Israel existing in any way whatsoever. Hamas have declared that they need to kill all the Jews in the world. So if we want to have a better future, we want to have a chance of peace in the future, then we need to make sure that Hamas have had their capabilities completely destroyed and the leadership has been completely destroyed. So there is a chance of a better future. And I hope that afterwards we'll be able to have that conversation. But at this point, the conversation needs to be, how do we stop Hamas? How do we make sure they never do this again? We're acting in the way that any country and any government would do. I'm sure that if some tragedy and terror attack and vicious thing like this took place in Nigeria, that Nigeria would expect their government to do this. You know, we're a very small population. We're a population of 9.5 million people. 1,300 of our people were massacred. Over 100 were kidnapped. Everybody knows someone. Everybody in Israel knows somebody who was killed. Everybody in Israel knows somebody who was murdered or was kidnapped. We're a very, very small country, and so this is the scale of what's happened there. So we're acting as we will, and yes, we want a better future, but now we need to focus on making sure that Hamas can never do this again.
Let's go back to the day before all this started happening. Hamas says the action they are taking is in retaliation for the desecration of their holy places, the inhuman situations they're exposed to, checkpoints everywhere. They can't do anything without the say-so of Israel. In the words of one of the people interviewed in the course of this crisis, they said they are better dead than alive. So what difference does it make? Do you agree that some actions of Israel may have made this possible, especially construction in the disputed areas and stuff like that? Do they have any genuine reason to bring up this kind of anti-Israeli sentiments?
Hamas needs no reason to murder babies. They're murdering babies. That's what they're doing. There's no justification for that. And I would remind all of your viewers of two things. Firstly, in Gaza, Israel left in 2005. There's not been a single Israeli soldier, not been a single Israeli settler, not been a single Israeli member of the community living there since 2005. We were told by the Palestinians, if you left in 2005, if you leave, you can have a peaceful society. You can have a peaceful neighborhood on you. That was what our hope was. That's the first thing. The second thing is they talk about holy places. In Jerusalem, there is the Al-Aqsa Mosque, the Haram al-Sharif. And there it's completely open to everybody. Muslims pray today. There are thousands of Muslims praying freely on the Temple Mount, on the Al-Aqsa Mosque. Israel guarantees freedom of religion to everybody. So when Hamas tell you these things, you have to remember Hamas are lying. And I would ask you, is there anything in the world that justifies babies alive? Is there anything in the world that justifies cutting the heads off young children, of tying up partygoers and massacring them? We've heard a story of a woman who was pregnant, having her stomach cut open and the fetus ripped out while she was still alive. There is nothing that justifies that. There is nothing on God's earth that justifies that. When Boko Haram kidnapped the Chibok girl, was there ever a reason for it? No, they may have made up a reason. The reason they did it was because they were evil. When ISWAP blew up the United Nations headquarters here, Was there ever a reason? No, they made up a reason. Evil exists in the world, and we need to eradicate it. And Hamas are evil. Hamas are ISIS. And in the same way the world acted against ISIS, and ISIS made up their lies, and the world saw through their lies, we will see through the Hamas lies, and we will deal with Hamas in the way the world dealt with ISIS. Because any decent human being knows that the murder and mass rape and defilement of bodies cannot be excused for any reason.
The worry of a number of people around the world, including supporters of Israel, is that the retaliation might go even to extents that will have nothing to compare with what had been done by the Hamas. And in the process, that innocent Palestinians who actually believe that there should be peace between Israel and Palestine are bearing the brunt. And I watched one of the Palestinian leaders saying, in all these, more of ordinary Palestinians are being killed, and the Hamas leadership, the Hamas terrorists have not been touched.
Well, so we know that the Hamas terrorists and the Hamas leadership have been touched. And of course, Hamas are going to tell you that they haven't been, because that's part of their propaganda war. We do everything we can to protect civilians. We are like any other country in the world. Our army fights in front of the civilians. Hamas put the civilians in front of them. Today, we told the Palestinian civilians to leave certain areas because we're going to carry out military operations. And Hamas have announced, don't leave these areas. Civilians, stay where you are. We want you. The Hamas want these civilians to be hurt. That's in their interest. Hamas are not good for the Palestinians. Palestinians have got places to go. They can go to shelters. There are a number of shelters through schools, through hospitals, through all of these places. And the United Nations communicate with us every day where they are. And we make sure that we avoid those areas to avoid those civilian. Hamas are blocking Palestinian civilians from leaving the conflict zones. Hamas are firing rockets from within people's bedrooms. They are firing rockets from in their kitchens. They are sitting their headquarters. In the last round of conflict, the Hamas headquarters was underneath the hospital. Hamas deliberately put civilians in harm's way. So we have to understand that. If we want a better long-term future, we need to remove Hamas. That's not only good for Israel, it's good for Palestinians. The Palestinians have been suffering in Hamas for 15, 16 years since Hamas brutally and violently took over the Gaza Strip. In the Gaza Strip, Hamas have been throwing people off buildings that they disagree with. They've been dragging them through the streets on the back of the car if they've done something against the Hamas leadership. They shoot people in the legs if they do something that the Hamas terrorists don't like. So, let's understand who we're dealing with here. They came into Israel and they massacred 1,300 men, women, and children. And we will do what we need to do in order to make sure that never happens again, and also to make a better future. But be clear, civilians will get killed, because there's never been in history ever where civilians haven't been killed accidentally. They're in the line of fire. It's terrible. It's tragic. But we need to do what we need to do so that this never happens again.
I'm interested in the point you made, that you have coordinated with the United Nations and other authorities to ensure that civilian casualties are minimized as much as possible. But a lot of people may not agree with you completely. When, for instance, we saw Red Crescent vehicles and those that were helping injured civilians being targeted, killed, where we see that the Israeli armed forces have attacked mosques and then some hospitals. How would, ordinary Palestinians believe what they are told, that look, if you go to the south, or if you go to this area, you will not be touched, when these special places have also been touched?
Well, I would ask that question to Hamas. Why do you put your rocket stores under a mosque? Let me ask you a question. When does a mosque stop becoming a mosque? If I put 100 or 200 rockets underneath that I'm about to fire into Israel to aim at Israeli civilian populations. In the last couple of days, 5,000 rockets have been fired into Israeli civilian centers, killing Israeli civilians, wounding Israeli civilians. And if you store these under a mosque, when does that mosque stop becoming a mosque and it becomes an arms depot? If you're using your ambulance to not really be an ambulance, but to transport Hamas terrorists, when does it stop being an ambulance and it becomes a vehicle to transport terrorists? You know, when you and I, we look at this situation and we assume that Hamas is a rational actor, that Hamas is going to act in the way that you or I would act. We would never use a mosque to store weapons. We would never use an ambulance to transport fighters. But you also never rape and murder and burn the bodies of babies. But Hamas do these things. That's what they do. That's who they are. They are like ISIS, and they abuse everything because they know that the pictures on the other side will start to look like that. One of the questions I'd ask you, last week there was an attack, a rocket attack in the area of Jerusalem in a town called Abu Ghosh, and a rocket landed on a mosque there. There was nothing going on there apart from it being a mosque. It wasn't being used for anything else. An Arab town in Israel with Arab citizens of Israel, and the rocket fired by Hamas landed on the mosque and damaged the mosque. So, you know, let's not pretend that these people care about Islam. They are nothing to do with Islam. In the same way that ISIS had nothing to do with Islam, Hamas have nothing to do with Islam. They use it as an excuse, and it's offensive to any decent person that they would hide behind this. I've spoken to imams, I've spoken to religious leaders in the Muslim community, and they've all condemned this as being brutal and abusing the name of Islam, because it's nothing to do with Islam.
Let me ask you, how are Israeli civilians, the Israeli population, like you just said, almost everyone in Israel knows someone who was killed in this Hamas operation. How are the people in Israel healing? How are they handling the emotional impact of what has just happened?
You know, we're still processing. We haven't even buried our dead. There are so many dead. You know, in Jewish law, like in Muslim law, we try and bury our dead on the same day. We try and bury them the day they were there that you die. But we can't do that because there are so many. Somebody who was meant to be getting married next week, and they wanted at their wedding to have a very famous Israeli pop song played. And the singer who sang that song came to the funeral, and he sang the song at the funeral instead of singing it at a wedding. He sang this love song as the groom was buried. So we are really traumatized. We've just to give you an understanding of the scale. They've had to appeal for volunteer grave diggers. We can't dig the graves fast enough. They have asked for people to come to hospitals to help identify bodies. It's a real trauma, and we're suffering, and we're still mourning our loss. And this will take a long time to get over. I don't know we'll ever get over it. If I'm honest, I think that we will still be talking about this massacre in 50 years' time, in 100 years' time. More Jews were murdered on Saturday than any other day since the Holocaust. That's the scale of this. That's the scale of this. That these people, these Hamas terrorists, used ISIS tactics. They use Nazi tactics to murder us and to kill us. And so we're still very traumatized. And we will overcome it. We will come out of this stronger. But we are mourning, and we are sad. And we will get over it.
You know, a lot of experts, especially in the Middle East, are worried that so much progress was being made. I mean, before this happened, there was this, hope and optimism that with Israel, Saudi Arabia peace process being realized, that would have helped in making this Middle East calmer. With what is happening, do you think we can still pick the bits and pieces of this peace process that Israel had started with a number of Middle Eastern countries, Islamic countries, or is this going to be truncated by what has happened?
No, I hope we'll move forward with this. And I think that you raise a very, very important point. Iran, the Islamic Republic of Iran, is a backer of Hamas. It's a financial backer. It's a military backer. It's intimately involved in Hamas. It's intimately involved in Hezbollah in Lebanon as well. And Iran does not want this progress that you're talking about. Iran wants to stop this process, and you know that we should always understand that when we're seeing the actions of Hamas and maybe the actions of Hezbollah in the north, that these are being supported by Iran in many, many ways, directly and indirectly. And we know that Iran doesn't want this process that you're talking about, doesn't want progress. Iran doesn't want peace. It doesn't want progress in the Middle East. So I think that's a big factor in everything that we hear. But I am still hopeful that after this, we will be able to move forward, because peace is the only way forward. A better Middle East, the only answer to this barbarism of Hamas, to the evil of Hamas, is for good people to get together and say, no, we want a better future. And I'm hopeful that will be over. But that's for the day after. At this point, we need to make sure that that day is closer and that day is better by doing what we need to do to take all of those who oppose that progress and oppose that peace out of the picture.
Your Excellency, we are, coming to the close of our conversation, but I'd like to just point out that the Iranian government, and we had the supreme leader having to, say this himself, they have said they have no hand in the planning, in the conversations that led to the Hamas attack on Israel. Why is your government still accusing Iran of complicity in what happened?
Iran provides Hamas with their weapons. They provide them with their training. They provide them with their financing. They provide them with all the equipment. So, it may be that Iran didn't say attack today, but Iran have called for the destruction of Israel. Iran have called for the wiping out of Israel in the same way that Hamas are calling out for the wiping out of Israel. So I'm not going to say to you that they did or they didn't say to Hamas, go attack today. But I am going to say to you that they are sponsoring Hamas. They are providing Hamas with financing, with weapons, with leadership, with training. That's definitely happening. And we know that's happening, and we know they're providing with ideological backing. We saw yesterday that the supreme leader of Iran put out a tweet saying he praises what they did, that this is positive, this is the best thing they've done. So there's certainly no issue here that they are pushing this forward. Again, they may not have had a direct hand in exactly the timing in this particular operation, but if Iran wasn't backing Hamas, Hamas would not have been able to do this.
Okay, there's no doubt that the Palestinian Authority, to a great extent, has cooperated with the State of Israel to some point to see that this peace that is being pursued becomes successful. But with what is happening and the way Israel is reacting to it, where is your relationship with the Palestinian Authority? And what do you think all this will do to the credibility of the Palestinian Authority, which was already like a lame duck in Palestine?
Well, the Palestinian Authority is based in the West Bank. The Palestinian Authority don't run Gaza. They haven't had any influence in Gaza since 2007. And so this is about us in Gaza and Hamas. The Palestinian Authority, with their leadership, are in the West Bank. This wasn't carried out from the West Bank. This was carried out by Hamas terrorists. And we need to also make a distinction between the Palestinian Authority and Hamas. We've seen how Hamas have treated members of the Palestinian Authority. We've seen what Hamas have done to them as well. So Hamas is an enemy of everybody. Hamas is an enemy of any decent person. And so, we need to be focusing on Hamas at this point. We need to be focusing on this ISIS-based equivalent in our region, and to destroy it, because that will only be good in the long run for Israelis, for Palestinians, for the Palestinian Authority, and for the entire world. So we need to make that distinction. It's very good that you made that distinction. But those are the people that we want, that we're talking to and speaking to. Hamas is a different situation completely.
Mr. Ambassador, finally, you are in Nigeria, and let's bring it home. How have you seen the reaction of African countries, and especially your host country, Nigeria? How have they reacted? How have they empathized with Israel at these trying times?
We've seen a huge outpouring of support from Nigerians. We've received phone calls, and we've received letters, and we've received cards, and we've seen people sessions, and we've seen people out making it clear that we know that the Nigerian people understand what's going on, and the Nigerian people have been backing us. You know, Nigeria is a country that has suffered the evils of terrorism. Nigeria knows what this terrorism is. Nigeria knows what it is to have people kidnapped. You know, we've got over 100 women and children that have been kidnapped by Hamas, babies as young as 9 months old, Holocaust survivors, grandmothers of 84 years old. You know, Nigeria's experienced what it's like to have these people kidnapped. And so, you know, we know that Nigerians understand. We know Nigerians are with us. Nigeria is our friend. And we appreciate their friendship of the people of Nigeria when this is happening.
Mr. Ambassador, I must thank you for your time. As this development keeps unfolding, I'm sure we'll get back to you from time to time. Thanks a million for being our guest.
Thank you very much for having me.